Welcome to Let's Talk, where Spokane Talks hosts seek out and discuss the latest on a variety of interesting topics to Spokane and North Idaho. Here's today's host, Mike Fitzsimmons.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and let's talk politics. We have an upcoming general election. The primaries are now behind us, and in one of the Spokane County races, we have Ozzie Knezovich, the incumbent and veteran Sheriff of Spokane County, seeking re-election. You've done this for 12 years. You want 4 more, really?
You know, a lot of people ask me that, Mike. Yes, I do.
Now, I don't characterize this as much of a political contest. I mean, your opponent, I don't think, is taken seriously. I think the numbers that were displayed in the primary election will be similar to what happens in the general. So let's I mean, you can never assume that anything can happen, but let's look at now, with 12 years under your belt, as it were. You had some things, and we've talked over those 12 years, that you wanted to accomplish, some of which you have, much of which you have not. There are a number of things still undone. You moved in the direction, but there are impediments. Let's talk about those sorts of things. Which of the accomplishments that you were hoping to achieve 12 years ago and continue to hope as you go forth in the next 4 years, do you think you can get done? You
know, part of my goal throughout the first 12 was to bring the agency to a level of professionalism. Professionalism in my industry is measured by accreditation and making sure that your standards meet that level. We've done that, and there's only 3 other areas that I am working towards. And quite frankly, Mike, we'll be one of the very few agencies in the United States to accomplish one of them, and that's to have our training unit nationally accredited. In my opinion, the most important thing that I do as sheriff for this community is to ensure that these deputies that are out on the street are highly trained, highly motivated, and professional. That is the ultimate role that I fulfill. Because if I fulfill that role, all the other things come into place. Our crime rates go down. Our crime rates have fallen over the last 5 years, property crimes included. So that professionalism is really important, and to get that training unit nationally accredited is going to be a major thing for this region. The Emergency Management Office will be accredited by 2020, and our forensics unit will be nationally accredited before the end of the year. I think we'll be able to accomplish that. So the accreditation pieces will all be done. Our air unit, there's only 10 agencies in the entire United States that are accredited air wings. We're one of them. So that's kind of a special mark that a volunteer air unit has reached that level of professionalism. The one thing that I haven't been able to get done, and Mike, it's things that we've talked about ad nauseum, you and I, for years. This criminal justice system needs to be repaired, and at the hinge point of that is the Spokane County Jail has to be remodeled and has to be brought up to proper standards.
Now, I want to get into that in some detail in this session, but let's go back to the accreditation. That's the professional yardstick by which your department, your agency is measured. But when it comes to the public, trust, reliability, and a sense that the right things are happening at the right time and the right leadership is in place, it has always been their yardstick. It's not nearly as technical, if you will, as some of the accreditation issues that you're referring to, but it's every bit as important. And when you, 12 years ago, took over this office, it was in some disarray. Yes. It was largely a good old boys network. There was a lot of things not to like about the way the Sheriff's Department was run. Okay? Right. And it was no one individual's fault, but a collective perhaps a benign neglect to a lot of things that were occurring here, not an intentional corruption by any stretch. I shouldn't suggest that at all. But you got that fixed. People trust you, Ozzie. They trust you. They trust the Sheriff's Department. Those cars, that badge, that shield means something different today than it did 12 years ago. And obviously, there's still some distance to go, but it's a lot better shape than it was.
That's one part, Mike, that I just received a national award.
I saw that.
For that leadership.
Yeah.
Never heard of this organization, didn't even know this award existed, but we received a national award for the leadership that linked our public to the public trust of this agency. And people ask me all the time, Sheriff, we see you everywhere. Well, Mike, that's because the most important aspect of law enforcement is the public. And it's that public trust. I am a firm believer that people only follow and only trust the things that they know, that they're comfortable with. The reason I'm out...
It's human nature.
Yeah, it is. And the reason I'm out in the public, the reason I attend every event I can, and it's not just during election year, it's every year, is because in order for people to understand the sheriff's office, they have to know the sheriff's office. And what better way for them to know the sheriff's office rather than see the sheriff.
On a personal level.
On a personal level.
Not just what they read in the papers.
Exactly.
They got to know who these folks are and what they do and why.
Exactly. And that philosophy, for a large extent, has grown within the agency because now the deputies reach out to the public. The deputies are involved in many aspects within the public. It's all about the citizen. The day that we forget that it's about the citizen, well, we've lost focus of what we're about. Somebody asked me, Sheriff, what would you do differently if you actually had a real opponent? And I'm not disparaging my current opponent when I say that. This was a question I was asked. I said, I do the same thing I'm doing right now. You have a strong message. You show the results that you've given, and you go out and you talk to the people. Because the day that we forget about that aspect, the reason I run for sheriff is for the people out there. The day I forget that is the day I will no longer have what we currently have, and more importantly, the day I stop doing that is the day I will take the badge off, because that means I've forgotten where I came from.
Yeah, it's unlikely that we'll see that anytime soon, I'm afraid. But in any event, one thing that the sheriff has mentioned before, and he and I have all spoken about this on the air many a time, is the condition of the criminal justice system. It's a broken system. And part of the problem is facility, not just the philosophy of the criminal justice system. You have long concerned yourself with the fact that the county jail is just simply inadequate, and we're acting like that's no big deal, we don't need to worry about that. And yet at the same time, when it's brought to the fore and the problems are pointed out, everyone wrings their hands, but nobody seems to step forward and say, all right, tax us, we'll fix it. And we're still in that same position, one that we were in 4 years ago and 4 years before that.
We've been in that position since 1995. If you remember, my predecessor actually ran for sheriff on the concept of fixing this.
That's right.
So in 1995, the jail was identified as being overcrowded. We kicked that can, we kicked that can, we kicked that can. And, you know, Mike, it got to the point where I took a drastic move, and that was I went before the Board of County Commissioners and said, look, in order for us to get this fixed, all the politicians in the area have to have skin in the game. So let's get the Criminal Justice Council back in order, because it hadn't met for years. By RCW, it should have been meeting.
It went to seed, though. It
did.
Didn't.
So I said, let's bring it back. Let's get everybody around the table so they have skin in the game. Board, you control the finances of the jail. That means you control the direction of the jail. You need to take control of the jail's operations. Now, hindsight being 20/20, looking back on it, I may, if I had to make that decision again, I don't think I would have. I think I would have kept control of the jail, because at least they had an advocate at that point that was willing to speak publicly for them. But regardless, the Board of County Commissioners agreed with me. They took control of the jail, and we've had this Criminal Justice Council since 2013. We have gone nowhere. We really, okay, yeah, we got a grant. We did the one thing with that grant we swore we'd never do as a county. We said we'd never fund personnel with a grant again, because when the grant's gone, the personnel go. Right. We funded our pretrial services with that grant, and that is the critical backbone of the entire system. I spoke against it. I advised not to do it. They went ahead and did it. Now we face the end of this grant, and we are also facing the possible end of our pretrial services.
Is this a fight you think you can win? I mean, you're going on you're finished with 12, and you're headed into 16 if you're reelected, which is a lot more than likely. Can you get this done?
I think we can get it done, and I'll tell you why. More and more, Mike, out there, I have people coming to me now, people that 12 years ago were no. Those people are now going, we need to build this thing, we need to get this fixed, we'll do everything we can to help you. And these are, on the conservative end, they are willing to actually campaign for the issue. Then you have the progressive end, who is now having their constituents come to them and go, we're tired of this, this needs to be fixed. More importantly, Mike, and last Wednesday I kind of got in a little bit of trouble with the Law and Justice Council, because I went...
It isn't the first time.
No, it's not. I went, look, we have sat here and done nothing. We take exception to that. You show me what we've done. Well, guess what? At that point, people started not being able to rise to the challenge there. And I said, more importantly, in the last, I think it's 13 months, you've had 7 people die in that jail. It's kind of unprecedented. Yes. I take that very personally, because every human life matters. In our system of government, you're innocent until proven guilty. All right? I don't think jail should be a place of great comfort or anything else, or Taj Mahal, whatever, but basic life services and things like that should be provided and maintained within those walls. Nobody should die because they went to jail. Am I saying that there are things that there's culpability here? I don't know. Those investigations are pending. But what I'm saying is, after 7 deaths, and I will say that this is fairly unprecedented, we as a community now have to look in the mirror and go, did we wait too long? I hope that people are listening today, and I hope that they really take a hard look at that, because this system needs to be fixed. It
Nobody's
can't wait.
ever disagreed that it needs to be fixed, but there
they
hasn't
just
been
don't
political
want to
courage
move
to step up and take the risk necessary to do the fixing. And that includes the citizenry. I mean, there was a time, as you know, and I'm not, even though you have a number of folks that are coming forward saying, yes, we want to do this, so we'll campaign and such. If you put it in front of the voter, would the voter approve it? I'm not so sure, as we speak, that they would.
When the polling's been done in the past, it's bounced between 50 to 55%, yes. Supermajority. This has to be a supermajority vote.
60 plus.
You take the time and you educate, like we do with buses, because I swear, Mike, if I wore a bus uniform, I could get things passed. Okay? This is much more important at this level. And there has to be political courage now. We need politicians that are going to step up now and go, you're right, 7 deaths is unacceptable. We will get this fixed. I'm afraid that we're going to be probably stalemated for another 17 months before we have a new administration in the city ranks that is going to take, hopefully, that direction.
So we'll have to wait and see for a period of time. Let's talk about the mood of society these days. Oh. Law enforcement 12 years ago was, in many measures, different from the way it is today. For one thing, you had a community that was, shall we say, just a lot more placid than it is today. We've got a lot of angry people out there, angry for sometimes inexplicable reasons. but they're angry. And they're angry, even though they trust officers, they get angry with them easily, quickly. Even though they realize the purpose of law enforcement is to protect them, they tend to sometimes lose sight of that reality, and we've got lots of dangers out there. Citizen to citizen, officer to citizen, it's gotten to be a pretty angry environment. I know you have some thoughts as to how that has come about, but what do we do about it?
What we do about it is really the hard question. And here's why it's the hard question, Mike. In order to fix this, we, the American people, mom and pop, we need to stand up against the loud extremes. And that's what's controlling our politics anymore. If you look at primaries for the most part, this primary may be being different than some others because we had not a bad, relatively, turnout in the primary compared to other
Nothing to
years.
write home about, but it was
No,
all right.
But compared to the last few,
That's true. That's true.
It's better. But as long as middle America is willing to allow the extremes to control the voice, then we're going to have this horrible, incivil conversation that's going on. The civility has left the room. You can't really disagree with anybody anymore because it's a personal attack almost.
Yes.
And it's like, folks, I'm just giving you my perspective. If you would listen long enough to my perspective and give me a chance to listen to yours, I'm pretty sure somewhere in here we could probably solve a lot of these issues. We could take your great idea, my great idea, put them together and actually do something for the people of this country.
Of course, the anonymity of social media has permitted people to express themselves, shall we say, in a much more forceful way and feel as though there are no consequences for doing so, and that is contributing a lot to this.
Consequences. You know, some of the things that people say on social media, if you take it back to the founding of this country and that era, an affront to someone's honor was taken very seriously.
Oh, yes.
To the point of pistols at dawn.
Dueling pistols,
Okay.
sure.
100 years ago, or 150 years ago, was high noon out on the street. 50 years ago was take it around the corner. Mm-hmm. Now there's nothing for the victim of that bullying to do because society doesn't allow the victim to do anything about it. I mean, these people can say all these horrible things, but you signed up for it. You can't fix it. What I keep going back to is this, Mike. We either get this to stop, or the next generation looking at us is going to be much worse, because we wonder where bullying comes from. Well, every adult out there needs to look in the mirror, because if you're out there on social media pounding on people like that, you think your kids aren't paying attention? Our kids reflect who we are, and we're not being a good example to the kids anymore. We need to be able to get back to the table and act like adults, agree to disagree at times, and move on. But my fear is if we have taken it to the point where it's almost glorified, we hold somebody up that does this type of stuff. We can't do that. We have to get back to teaching simple values. And Mike, we've forgotten those values.
So now let's then fold one other element into this. Locally, you would deal with this, and you deal with it, of course, on a national, even an international scale, and that is journalism, the press. We talk about having an inflamed society, but we also have folks who are pouring the kerosene and fanning those flames because they sell newspapers, they bring ratings into news shows, and the truth is the first casualty. Is it necessary for us to tell the truth? What is necessary for us to do is to agitate something so that we can, make people watch our station or read our publication or whatever the case happens to be. And that has complicated your life as a law enforcement officer.
It has. Some people would say that I don't like the media or the press. You know differently, because we've had discussions about this, quite frankly, one too many times maybe. I am a firm believer that our founding fathers had it right.
They did.
In order to have a free nation, you have to have a free press.
And it's the only one of its kind. But
Exactly.
there is high risk associated with that.
And we're seeing the outcomes of that high risk, because with that great protection that's given by the Constitution to our press and our media comes a great responsibility. That great responsibility is to tell the people of this country the facts. Let them make the decisions. Anymore, it's more, they've become more on the activist side. We watched our nation, and there are people who are probably going to go up in arms when I say this, but folks, if you really want the facts, Mike and I would be more than happy to chat with you. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but this country broke itself apart for much intent over Ferguson. That one event was kind of a seminal moment where we as a nation tore ourselves apart based on unfact.
You could see it coming.
Yep.
There were things that led to that. There were predecessor events that occurred there, but you could see it coming. But you're right. That was a bellwether moment.
It was. And when you talk to people about that, about that event, some of them will get outright indignant.
They will.
Until you go, okay, here are the facts. And by the time you've run through all the facts of that event, they go, but nobody told us that. Well, you and I were talking before we went on air that I've literally had discussions with reporters, and I've looked them right dead in the eye and went, are you really going to go that direction with that story? Because you haven't done the proper research. I'm giving you here, read. I don't want to look at that. I'm going to run my story, and whatever's wrong in this story, somebody else in another story will clean it up later.
Maybe.
And I asked that question, what happens if nobody comes back? This falsehood, because what you're about ready to say did not happen. If it didn't happen, it becomes not true.
It becomes the foundation of further discussion predicated on that, which means the falsehood
grows
more and more and more and more until it's completely out of control and no one knows what the origin was at all.
So if you're not willing to do your research, then I suggest don't run the story until you do. But they're driven by this pressure to be first, to lead, and quite frankly, the casualty, as you said, has become the fact and the truth. And school shootings.
Yeah.
Mike, we are living in a new age of mentality with school shooters. They now are starting to look at it, and they want to live. They want to survive that event. The shooter, before they commit suicide or get shot. They're starting to want to live. And the reason they want to live is they want to see the damage that's been done by that event. If you take a hard look at that, the press will not report on teen suicides. Why? Because they are afraid that more teens will commit suicide. But they're more than happy to report on these kids that are killing other kids. And these kids study those past events, and it's now a challenge to hit the higher body count. This is new. 25 years I've studied this phenomena. This is new psychology in that they are actually studying it, and they want to survive so they can see the aftermath. Yes, we need to report on the event. We do not have to glorify these people.
And also, merely reporting on the event is not necessarily glorification.
No.
They are facts.
They are facts.
Sometimes the press will not report certain things because they think somehow or other they're helping the situation. That's not their call, really. No. Their call is to report the facts and let the consumer of news and information make those sorts of choices. But that's, of course, a philosophical discussion perhaps for another time. As we look to the future then, for a new term for Knezovich as the Sheriff of Spokane County. And we look at new personnel who will be filling in positions in other political positions around this. Are you comfortable, hopeful, encouraged?
Yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is because I watch people as they run for office. And Mike, I get contacted by a lot of people from both sides of the political spectrum that want my support. The problem is anymore what I'm starting to see isn't just that, there's always a self-serving side of things. That's fine. But what I'm seeing is it's not so much that, they're running based on one issue. They're a one issue pony, if you will. That's not a reason to run. If you're going to run for the right reason. Run because you really want to help people. You want to do it right, and you want to make things better. Don't be an activist, because that's what I'm seeing is more and more of the activist mindset. Activists, okay, what are you going to do when that's over? You've solved that issue. What's next for you? So I worry about that aspect, because I don't see people willing to get into the political spectrum for the benefit of the overarching community. It's always
it's about service.
Yep.
We're just about out of town. If folks want to get in touch with you and get other questions asked and answered, how can they do that?
You can contact me through my campaign email, which is sheriffozzie2018@gmail.com. Again, that's sheriffozzie2018@gmail.com. Or go to voteknezovich.com. We'll take you to websites and get me at those. And the thing that really makes me happy for the future is this, Mike. The kids getting into law enforcement right now are getting into law enforcement for the right reason. They want to help people. They want to solve problems. We have a great core of kids that are coming into this, and quite frankly, I've heard it from many of the new ones. We came to this agency because you believe in what it should be. That's a great aspect for our agency. The leadership coming up, we are looking at transition. We're doing that transition planning. What does it look like in the future? We're identifying those young leaders that are going to take this agency into the next level, because my goal, Mike, is like any master in martial arts or any great teacher, the goal of that instructor should be to make sure that your predecessors or the people coming behind you are better than you are.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. I want that leadership to be much better than the leadership they have now.
To be continued. He is Ozzie Knezovich, the incumbent Sheriff of Spokane County, seeking your vote in November. That's this edition of Let's Talk. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons. Thanks for viewing.
Let's Talk is produced in Spokane, Washington by Spokane Talks Media, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksMedia.com. We wish you a great day.